Hi, everybody. My name is Colleen Alexinas, and I'm being interviewed here for home and school connections and how it relates and encompasses English language learners. Let's start off with culturally responsive teaching. Culturally responsive teaching, or CRT, is an educational approach that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. It connects student culture, language, and life experiences with what they learn in school. Let's start with the first question. What are cultural influences on teaching and learning? Cultural influences profoundly shape teaching and learning in numerous ways. It's crucial for educators to understand these influences to certain inclusive and effective learning environments. One way is through communication style, both verbal and nonverbal communication. Educators need to be aware that in some cultures they value direct communication, and in some cultures they value indirect communication. Once you learn this, it leads to a sense of respect for them. Educators need to also be mindful of the various levels of formality and informality, and they also need to be aware that the way silence is perceived may be different from ours. We come from a very loud, boisterous family, and I know some families are more respectful of being quiet at certain times. In nonverbal communication, educators need to be aware of body language and eye contact. I know, for example, I had a student once that was new to my classroom, and he would not give me eye contact. And for a brief moment, I was thinking that maybe this child had special needs. And speaking with the family and learning more about his culture, I found that it was culturally respectful not to give eye contact. Another way is the learning style. Educators need to be open to various learning styles, such as individual learning versus collective learning. These learning styles are good to know as the child approaches group work and independent study work. Teachers also need to understand the learning preferences. Some children may prefer visual, while others like auditory, and some like kinesthetic. Another way is through our values and our beliefs. Our attitudes towards educators can motivate and engage students. The cultural norms can dictate how students interact with teachers and other authority figures. Another way is through social interactions. The cultural norms influence how students interact with their peers, and this can affect group work and social time in the classroom. The cultural expectations of gender roles and social behavior may influence student interactions. And lastly, cultural influences content and curriculum, and curriculum should reflect the diversity of students. The cultural background, this may lead to feeling, if we don't understand the cultural background, we may be portraying a discord, and therefore the child may feel excluded. It's just as important in connecting curriculum content to students' cultural experiences, enhances engagement and understanding. The second part of the first question is, how can ELs, English learners, cultural values and beliefs be integrated appropriately in the context of teaching and learning? Cultural competence is the ability to understand, appreciate, interact effectively with people from cultures or belief systems different from our own. Now, when teaching early learners, it is essential to be culturally competent to make instruction effective. Being culturally competent requires being self-aware, knowledge of others' cultures, being culturally sensitive. In English learning instruction. The teacher's role is to create a safe and inclusive learning environment. Culturally competent teachers create a welcoming, supportive environment where all students feel valued and respected. This requires educators to be aware of communication styles like we spoke about. Culturally competent teachers understand the role of culture in language acquisition and incorporate cultural content into their instruction. Culturally competent teachers build strong relationships with English language and their families. This is important as it creates a sense of trust, support, which is essential for student success. Integration English learners' cultural values and beliefs appropriately into teaching and learning requires sensitivity, respect, and a commitment to creating an inclusive classroom. Question number 2. What is the role of culture in student learning? Culture plays a fundamental and multifaceted role in student learning, profoundly influencing how students perceive, process, and engage with the information. The role of culture in student learning is shaping cognitive development. Culture influences how students think, learn, and solve problems. Different cultures may emphasize different cognitive styles, such as holistic versus analytical thinking. Please see the citation at the end of my work. There was a study done on the cognitive mind and English learners. The role of culture in student learning is that it influences and motivates and engages. Students are more likely to be motivated and engaged when they see their culture reflected in the curriculum and classroom environment. The role of culture in student learning affects communication and interactions. Understanding cultural differences in communication is essential for effective teaching and learning. The role of culture in student learning is that it provides context in learning. Students' cultural backgrounds influence their prior knowledge, skills, and their values. The role of culture in student learning also impacts social and emotional development. A culturally inclusive environment promotes positive social and emotional well-being. Question number 2 of number 2. How do school and classroom environments influence language acquisition, and what steps are necessary to create an inclusive environment? School and classroom environments significantly impact language acquisition, particularly for English language learners. A language-rich environment provides ample opportunity for students to hear and use target language. This includes exposure to formal and informal language. Opportunities for social interaction with native speakers and peers are crucial for language development. The interaction provides students with opportunities to practice their language and skills in meaningful contexts. A supportive and welcoming environment reduces anxiety and promotes language acquisition. Students are more likely to take risks and experiment with language when they feel safe and comfortable. When language learning is connected to students' cultural backgrounds, it becomes more meaningful and engaging. It helps students see the relevance of language learning in their lives. School environments provide opportunities for students to develop academic language, which is essential for success in school, including learning vocabulary, grammar, and discourse patterning specific to academics. To create an inclusive environment that supports language acquisition, there are several components. One component is being culturally responsive, that we have just discussed, incorporating students' cultural backgrounds into the curriculum and teaching practice by using culturally relevant materials and examples. Another component is a language-rich environment. Teachers should provide ample opportunities for students to hear and use the target language by using visuals, gestures, and other supports to enhance comprehension. Another component is collaborative learning by creating opportunities for students to work together and learn from one another. Another component is differentiating instruction. Educators adapt teaching strategies to meet the individual needs of all the students and provide scaffolding and support as needed. Differentiating instruction is designed for all learners, but even more highlighting in the English language learning. Another component is ongoing professional development. It's important to provide teachers with ongoing professional development on culturally responsive teaching and language acquisition, as it helps teachers gain the skills needed to help English language learners succeed. And the last one is family environment. Involve families in education of their children. Also communicate with families in a language that they understand multiple different ways, through translators, through text, through email, through phone calls. And that leads us to question number 3. What are some strategies for supporting and celebrating cultural diversity within education? Supporting and celebrating cultural diversity within instruction and leveraging home language and culture assets are crucial for creating an inclusive, enriching learning environment. Some strategies are to incorporate language strategies, historical accounts and examples from various cultures into your lesson, display posters, maps, and other materials that reflect the diversity of your students. You can invite guests to come and speak, depending on their cultural background, to share their knowledge. Incorporate various teaching methods such as cooperative learning. Storytelling is huge in a lot of cultures, and that might be one way, bringing in a storyteller. And visual presentations also helps reinforce what English language learners are hearing, and then they see it. The second part of the question number 3 is, what are some strategies for leveraging home language and cultural assets? And the strategies for this, teachers could encourage students to use their home language in the classroom when appropriate. Teachers could learn some basic phrases of students' home language to show respect. And teachers can also teach the other teachers can teach the native English students some of those non-native phrases so that the English language learner would feel part of the classroom included. Teachers can use multilingual books and materials when available. Lots of libraries, lots of audibles are all in various languages. Also encourage students to translate words and phrases for their classmates. This is what we had just spoken about. Teachers can also involve families. Invite a family to share their culture, knowledge, and traditions with the class. Teachers can build on prior knowledge using examples and analogies that are currently relevant to the students. And lastly, teachers can build a bridge between home and school. We can do this. Now we're moving on to the second portion of our interview, and that is under the category supporting the needs of English language learners in the classroom. The first question: what are some strategies for responsiveness to the different strengths, needs, and identities of all English learners, including special needs? Responsiveness to the diverse strengths, needs, and identities of all English language learners, especially those with special needs, requires a multifaceted and individualized approach. There are some effective strategies such as individual assessment and planning. This can consist of comprehensive assessments, The comprehensive assessment conducted through these assessments that consider both the language proficiency, potential learning disabilities, also to take into effect the individual education program, the IEPs, take into language plans, and when applicable, ensure IEPs address both language acquisition and special education needs. Another strategy is be culturally and linguistically responsive practicing, valuing home language, acknowledge and respect students' home language and cultural backgrounds. It is important to create a safe and inclusive classroom environment, but establish positive relationships with students and their families. And establish open communication with families, utilizing interpreters when necessary. It is important, as I pointed out in my reflection for this practicum experience, that I did have a family that they were unsure. They're actually going to reevaluate the child due to the fact they're not sure if it's a language barrier or if it's actually a developmental need. It will be interesting to find those facts out. Going back to the strategies, we have differentiating instruction and scaffolding, which we just spoke about, tailoring the instruction to meet the diverse learning need of the student. And of course, scaffolding is breaking down the complex test into smaller steps that might help the language learner, especially if there's a lot of instruction to that. And the last strategy would be collaboration and professional development, and collaborate in teams, foster collaboration between teachers, ESL teachers, special education teachers, general ed teachers, support staff. The language department is going to be needed to be called upon. And lastly, ongoing professional development to stay up to date on the research and the best practices. These all will help the responsiveness to the different strengths and needs and identify the English language students. Question number 2 would be, what is the importance of understanding the social, emotional, and cultural needs of students when establishing classroom routines and procedures? Addressing the social and emotional needs of English learners is crucial for their overall well-being and academic success. Creating a safe and inclusive classroom and establishing clear expectations and routines are helpful strategies in addressing social and emotional needs of English language learners. In addressing emotional needs, educators can collaborate with school counselors and social workers to provide appropriate support. Educators can also develop emotional literacy by providing opportunities for students to identify and discuss their feelings. And educators should promote self-esteem and confidence by encouraging students to take pride in their culture and linguistic identity. Fostering social skills, educators can create opportunities for students to interact with peers from diverse backgrounds, encourage participation in extracurricular activities and/or clubs. Educators also should explicitly teach social communication skills such as turn-taking, asking questions, and expressing opinions. Encourage students to develop empathy and cross-cultural communication skills. The second question to question number 2 is, what is the importance of understanding the social, emotional, and cultural needs of students when establishing classroom routines and procedures? Understanding the social, emotional, and cultural needs of students is fundamental when establishing classroom routines and procedures. When routines and procedures are designed with cultural sensitivity, all students feel valued and respected. This fosters a sense of belonging, which is essential for students to feel comfortable taking risks and engaging in learning. Having predictable routines provide a sense of security, especially for students who may have expressed who experience trauma or instability. This you might see in the families that are migrating or refugees, so let's be mindful for that. It is important for English learners who may already be dealing with stress of language acquisition and cultural adjustment to have clear and consistent procedures so it reduces anxiety and uncertainty. It allows students to focus on learning rather than worrying about what to expect. By establishing classroom routines and procedures, it promotes positive behavior and engagement. Recognizing cultural differences in communication styles and social norms help prevent misunderstanding and misinterpretations. Also, by integrating social and emotional learning, SEL, into classroom routines, it helps students develop essential skills such as self-regulation, empathy, and conflict resolution. These skills contribute to a positive classroom climate and enhance student engagement. Routines that include opportunities for interaction and collaboration help foster relationships between students and teachers. When students feel safe and supported, they are better able to focus on learning. Routines that address their social and emotional needs minimizes the distraction and promotes learning. Culturally responsive routines ensure that all students have equal access to learning opportunities. This helps to close achievement gaps and promote equality in education. And the last category that we're going to talk about is home and school connections. The first question: how might family and community practices or funds of knowledge influence language learning? The concept of funds of knowledge is incredibly important in understanding how family and community practices influence language learning. It highlights the idea that all families and communities possess rich bodies of knowledge and cultural practices that can be valuable resources for educators. Families and communities use language in specific, meaningful contexts. This includes storytelling, traditions, specialized vocabulary related to occupations or hobbies or ways of communicating within social groups. These contexts provide learners with authentic language input and opportunities to see how language is used in real-life situations. Families engage in various literacy practices such as reading, writing, and using technology. These practices can influence a child's early literacy development and their attitudes toward literacy itself. For example, families that value storytelling and oral traditions may foster strong narrative skills in their children. How exciting. The social interactions within families and communities provide opportunities for language practice and development. Children learn language through interacting with family members, friends, and community members. Establishing strong partnerships with families allows educators to learn about students' fund of knowledge and incorporate them into instruction. This can involve inviting families to share their expertise and cultural traditions with the class. Question number 2. Part 2. What are effective family engagement practices that support and highlight the assets of home languages, including communication, family involvement, and providing intentional strategies for families of English learners? Building strong family, community, and school partnership is essential for creating a supportive and enriching educational environment. There are several strategies that can be helpful. Teachers need to establish open and consistent communication. This is made of having multiple ways of communication. Newsletters, emails, phone calls, text, etc. Teachers also need to create opportunities for families to give feedback and share concerns. So it can't just be a one-way communication where the teacher is just asking the questions where there's only a one yes or no answer. It really should be like, tell me more about why Fred likes to do X, Y, and Z. Is this something that your family does? And allow them to elaborate. Teachers could incorporate culturally relevant materials and activities into the curriculum, and this will help foster a welcoming, inclusive environment. Teachers can also create opportunities for collaboration. This can be done through parent-teacher conferences, asking for volunteer opportunities like PTA, or being a mystery reader or a library helper, and invite community members to share their experiences with students. And lastly, the focus should be on building relationships. Teachers should show genuine interest in their student and family's lives and experiences. Teachers focus on positive interactions and celebrate student success, and family really like that. And lastly, what are some inclusive community engagement practices? Effective family and community engagement practices are crucial for supporting English language learners and valuing their home language. Here are some strategies to highlight the assets of home language. Teachers can affirm that the student's home language is valuable and an asset to school community. Teachers need to integrate home language into the classroom environment, such as displaying multilingual posters, incorporating multilingual books, and teachers should be celebrating through events that highlight linguistics and culturally diverse of school community. So if there is, for example, growing up, I never knew many Indian culture. And when I started teaching, and through the years, we were getting an influx of children from India who celebrated Diwali, and I did not know what Diwali was. I had to learn about it, and then I brought in material from an Indian, an Indian store, making mandalas for Diwali. So it was very interesting, and I just needed to share that with you guys. Where was I? Excuse me. I see. And teachers should be celebrating the culture. Communication is another strategy for highlighting home language. Teachers provide communication in families' home language through multiple ways. Teachers ensure access to interpreters or translators in communication that involve large amount of people. So you want to get a translator and an interpreter really for meetings, CPSEs, CSEs, any kind of big meeting that's going to need more interpretation really should be called upon. If it's just a communication back and forth, simple apps like Seesaw, Google Translate, and others could work in that little time frame. Family involvement is important when highlighting assets of home language. Teachers can encourage families to maintain and develop their home languages at home. Teachers could provide resources and activities that families can use to support children's literacy development in home languages. And teachers could invite families to share their culture, traditions, and experiences with the class. I just want to stop for a moment and just really focus on, I know I keep repeating myself on some of the things that you have heard, such as inviting the families in, inviting and collaborating. It's important that the teachers and the home life connect so that it can promote success. And the last question is, what are some inclusive community engagement practices? Some inclusive community engagement practices are Create community partnerships, collaborate with community organizations that serve families, such as maybe a library, or maybe a food pantry, or maybe a homeless shelter. We just never know what's in the community. Utilize these community resources, such as libraries and cultural centers, and you can recruit community volunteers to provide tutoring, mentoring, and other support services. I worked for Head Start for a long time, and they were fantastic with having community-based partnerships with a lot of different community members to connect with the families that we served. Being culturally responsive outreach, reach out to diverse communities to build relationships with community leaders, organize community events. Speaking of working at Head Start, I participated in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. It just showed I was being culturally respectful to most of the culture of the children in my classroom, as well as get a sense of community. Who am I serving when working as a Head Start teacher? And accessibility and inclusion. Hold community events in accessible locations that are convenient for the families, and provide childcare and transportation assistance if possible. Provide all materials and information in multiple languages. You want to have it in their community. A lot of the times, the English language learners, they like to stick together in feeling belongingness. If you put them in an environment or ask them to come to a community they don't know, they may not come because they don't feel like they belong. We want to build a welcoming community, create a safe and welcoming space for English language learners and their families to connect with each other. Celebrate the linguistic and cultural diversity of the community, and promote cultural understanding and respect within the community. There was a lot of information here today, everyone, and I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. I will be providing a sheet of information of all that was described here, and I hope you have a good evening. Take care and be well. Bye now.